everybody. R.A. Martinez here, and I'm in the Middle East right now. We're about to do 50 hours of prayer and worship in 7 different locations, and I was laying in my bed last night, 3 or 4 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I woke up, and this verse in Mark 14 was just in my mind, in my heart, and I just began to ponder the profound implications of what Jesus said in Mark chapter 14. He said, "Truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, the story of what she has done will be told in memory of her." And he was speaking of Mary of Bethany. And Jesus prophesied that Mary of Bethany would be a central figure in the last great missions movement. And so I just began to ponder, like, why, we don't hear a lot about Mary of Bethany and missions. A lot of times those two subjects are not in the same conference. Why did Jesus put Mary of Bethany right in the center of the last great missions thrust to take the gospel to the whole world? And so I just began to ponder the reality of what was it about Mary of Bethany that Jesus said, this is what I want to be part of what's proclaimed in the whole world. And I think it has to do with the worth of Jesus. You see, what did Mary of Bethany do? Well, a little bit earlier in the Gospels, in Luke chapter 10, Jesus comes to Bethany, which is a little town outside of Jerusalem, and he comes to Lazarus, Martha, and Mary's house, and he's visiting, and he's sitting there, and it says that Martha was busying herself, and it says Mary sat at his feet and listened to his teaching. And you guys know the story, but Martha comes to Jesus and goes, "Lord, do you not care?" So she's accusing Jesus that my sister won't help me. She's accusing her sister, and that's what the busy heart does. It accuses others for its own burnout. And Jesus goes, "Martha, Martha, you're troubled and anxious about many things, but only one thing is necessary." And what is that one thing? Well, it's the one thing that King David chose. In Psalm 27:4, he said, "One thing have I asked of the Lord, that which will I seek, to dwell in the house of the Lord all my days, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and to meditate or inquire in his temple." It was that heart that is prioritized gazing, dwelling, proximity, gazing, looking, and inquiring, speaking to the Lord as its primary value. And Jesus says to Martha, one thing is necessary, and Mary has chosen the good portion, and it will not be taken from her. No matter what you do to Mary, no matter how much you accuse her, you can't take away what she's gaining right now in my presence. Fast forward, Jesus comes back to Bethany, Passion Week, the beginning of Passion Week, right the week before he goes to the cross. And he's visiting. He's in Jerusalem, but he's staying in Bethany. And he's reclining at the table with the disciples, and he's already told them 3 times in the Gospels that he's going to go to the cross. He's going to get arrested, he's going to be tortured, and he's going to go to the cross. He's predicted his death 3 times, and all the while, the disciples are still arguing about who's the greatest and comparing their ministries and competing to see who's got the most influence and who's got the most anointing. And all the while, they're looking and comparing themselves to each other. Jesus is saying, "I'm going to the cross, I'm going to the cross, I'm going to the cross," and none of them hear it. Except for one person hears it. And he is in Bethany, and he's reclining at the table with the disciples, and Mary comes in with her bottle of perfume. And you guys know the story. She breaks open the bottle, and she pours it on Jesus. And in that bottle, the way she would have gotten that perfume and how much that perfume was worth, it really did represent all of her past, her present, and all of her future. I mean, the only reason she would have gotten that amount of perfume was that it was either an inheritance, or she saved up a lot of money and she was saving it for her future, possibly her marriage. And so when she breaks that bottle open, she's really saying, "You are worth my past, my present, and my future. All of my life is yours." And the disciples accuse her again, just like Martha did. They say, why this waste? Why do waste? Because they couldn't see the worth of the man that was sitting in front of them, because they were too busy competing and comparing themselves to each other. But Mary saw, because she sat at his feet and listened, because she was dwelling in his house, proximity, gazing on his beauty and inquiring in his temple, she saw the beauty, and she felt something about Jesus that the disciples didn't even feel. And she breaks her bottle, pours it out, and Jesus says this. Jesus says, she's anointed me for my burial. In other words, she knows the prophetic season she's in, and I'm looking for friends right now, and she's a friend to me when all of you guys don't even know what's going on. Then he says, and wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world, the story will be told of her. Why? Because only the ones that see Jesus like Mary saw Jesus, only the ones that see the worth of Jesus like Mary saw the worth of Jesus, will be the ones that will take their past, their present, and their future and break it upon his head and his feet, and take and go over oceans, across borders, into peoples and places they never would have picked on their own, but because they've seen the worth of Jesus, the price tag has disappeared, and they'll do anything. And that's why Mary Bethany becomes a central figure to the end-time missions movement, because Jesus says, only the ones that see me like she's seen me will be the ones that will declare my worth to the ends of the earth. So the worth of Jesus is the fuel of missions. But it's not just the fuel of missions, it's the finish line of missions. Because those that go and proclaim his worth are going to raise up, they're going to disciple nations that respond to Jesus the same way Mary and Bethany responded to Jesus. And we see that the end result of the missions movement is that every nation will sing. It's worship. John Piper says missions exist because worship doesn't. So Jesus goes, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, tell the story of Mary, because they will only go if they've seen me like Mary's seen me. They will only embrace the cost that they've seen my worth. And I want to replicate this heart in all the nations of the earth. I don't want just information about me to cover the nations. I want worship to explode across the nations, which means the nations need to see Jesus as beautiful and glorious. And so I believe that right now all over the earth, God is beginning to speak to those Mary Bethanies, the ones that have just stilled their heart to stay in his presence, and they're going to begin to feel his heart for peoples and places and nations they never thought. And it's going to be his worth that fuels them, and it's going to be his worth that causes the nations to sing. So the worth of Jesus is the fuel and the finish line of missions.